Do you know Mark Twain, the great American writer? He was also an entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, a man known as the world's most famous humorous novelist. Yet, he went through a period of deep depression and mental breakdown due to a serious illness. But when he stumbled upon a book, he became as excited as a child, devouring it without eating or sleeping. This book wasn't a masterpiece about some famous figure, but a novel about the coming-of-age experience of an 11-year-old girl named Anne. And that book was Anne of Green Gables *. Freckle-faced, red-haired Anne, orphaned and living a poor, desperate life. Despite her cruel fate, she managed to become the happiest person in the world, like a small sun radiating light onto herself and warming others. She inspired countless readers across generations. If you feel life is too boring, read this book to understand that your dullness has a reason. A writer once said that sometimes people can be ignorant, but they cannot be uninteresting. Perhaps the most important thing in life is to live an interesting life. What's the point of living a monotonous life, like the color of the desert, for decades? Interesting people actually possess incredible inner strength. Even when their eyes are filled with sorrow, they can still break through the fog and find poetry in the distant horizons. No matter how many ups and downs they face, they can still sing. Even in old age, they still smile and say, "I'm not worried about getting old. I'll definitely still be adorable." Can you feel it? The power of being interesting. Scientists are often astonished when observing celestial bodies, black holes, and particles in the universe. The world beneath astronomical telescopes or microscopes is often incredibly wondrous. For instance, many people assume all water droplets are the same, but German scientists observed that each droplet contains a unique pattern. From this perspective, we see that creation itself is truly fascinating. All things in the universe inherently possess an element of interest, and so do we. But how have we lived? Many people have gradually lost or failed to cultivate this interesting nature. There are hundreds of thousands of beautiful people in the world, but those with interesting souls are very few. Truly, this world has too few interesting souls. More accurately, living an interesting life is a rare ability for modern people. According to the author, Anne's coming-of-age journey in Green Gables is a healing story. In it, there are no bad people, only eccentric ones, no unpleasant things, only peculiar ones. You might worry that a story lacking conflict and personal struggle would be boring. But on the contrary, its wonder will make you unable to stop reading. After finishing this book, you'll realize that the difficulties, pains, and dullness in your own life can be transformed and healed by an interesting soul. No matter what life brings, your job is simply to be interesting. Everything has already been arranged. This theme is titled, "An Interesting Soul Can Heal Everything," inspired by L.M. Montgomery's famous novel, Anne of Green Gables *. An interesting life, half of it must be mountains, rivers, lakes, and oceans. On Prince Edward Island, two eccentric old siblings, Marilla and Matthew, lived at Green Gables. They were an unmarried, childless pair, reclusive and difficult to approach. For them, life at Green Gables was like a stagnant pond. For decades, it remained just as quiet. Every day, Marilla busied herself only with firewood, oil, fish sauce, and salt. For over 60 years, she had never set foot outside the area. Every day, she ate on time, slept on time, wove fabrics, sewed clothes, and tended to livestock and sheep. She had no other hobbies and no friends to chat with. Then there was Anne, an orphan girl from the orphanage, adopted into their home. She had just arrived but was immediately captivated by the scenery of Green Gables. However, Marilla warned her, "Don't look at such useless things." The cherry tree in the yard bloomed white as snow, and Anne excitedly called it Snow Queen. But Marilla said in an irritated tone, "The fruit of that tree is small and sour, and it attracts a lot of bugs." In truth, life is a mirror reflecting your own appearance. If you are uninteresting, life will be boring. If you spend your entire life busy just for the most basic existence, you will only neglect yourself. An interesting soul is one that, even in the darkest circumstances, can retain a sense of wonder for life, discovering the fascinating things the universe has already created, and then enjoying them. Anne, the girl repeatedly abandoned by fate. At age 3, her parents died. The kind Thomas couple adopted her out of pity, but then abandoned her in the countryside. The good Mrs. Hammond rescued her just before she starved, but despite Anne's resourcefulness among her 8 children, she was eventually sent to an orphanage. When she was joyfully adopted by the siblings at Green Gables, she almost got sent away again just for being an ugly, red-haired girl. They needed a boy, and the intermediary had twisted the facts, so she was sent by mistake. But even knowing she would have to return to the orphanage tomorrow, Anne allowed herself to enjoy the scenery here. She sat by the window, watching the birch trees for a while, then gazed at the distant mountains and stream. She gave the cherry tree a lovely name and chatted with it. Anne said, "If you decide to have a good time, you can always have a good time." You'll find many people like Marilla in real life, but those with interesting souls who love and enjoy nature like Anne are very rare. Most of us are often busy in the cycle of life, worrying about 3 meals a day. We are constantly pushed forward by society's pre-programmed path. Go to school, graduate work, marry, have children, send children to school, babysit grandchildren, and die. We spend decades busy with the most basic existence. We think we've lived a full life, but it turns out we've only lived half a life, because a large part, the poetic beauty of life, we haven't experienced. We've been obscured by an empty soul within our shell. Back then, I had a friend in my hometown who often rode me on his bicycle across the fields. He loved comparing the clouds in the sky to strange shapes. He said he would become a writer one day. But now, whenever I talk to him, he only ever discusses his 2 teenage children, complaining about how busy work is, how people treat him, and the pressure of money. When I returned to my hometown after studying abroad for many years, meeting my high school friends again, I didn't know if I felt out of place in the crowd or if my friends were about to lose half their lives. Their topics of conversation, worries, and goals revolved only around children, spouses, rising real estate prices, and increasingly expensive groceries. It was always the same. I shared about Anne with some recent university graduates, but their faces looked sullen. They wanted me to recommend a book on how to get rich, how to improve their skills to get ahead like their peers, not a dreamy book like one for children. Even with interesting things from nature right beside them, people didn't want to look, dismissing it as romantic, fantastical, silly, a waste of time, abnormal, and unrealistic. If life loses its poetry, it's just like a dull knife, not fatal, but it can truly hurt you. And eventually, people will realize that even without great storms or challenges, even having achieved material goals and completed society's programmed cycle like everyone else, within an uninteresting soul, you will still be ravaged by this dull existence. But have you ever considered that the culprit for all this could be yourself? Don't close your heart. Don't blame the sun for not arriving, for not immersing yourself in nature and the universe, for not discovering the poetic and interesting things in life. Life can only be a barren land. Sociologist Frederick once said that suffering, like happiness, is truly just a feeling in the heart. Life is boring precisely because you live like an empty shell. An interesting soul will always be able to see rivers, lakes, mountains, and oceans, feeling the poetic beauty in this universe, even on cloudy, stormy days. And no matter how difficult or distorted life becomes, interesting things will turn back and heal you. An interesting life. Even if daily routines remain unchanged, imagination must soar. Anne had a cruel fate, but what helped her transform difficult days into joyful ones was her imagination. She told Matthew that after being abandoned repeatedly, she lived in an extremely desolate place, and without imagination, she couldn't have continued to live. A writer once said that Anne possessed 2 invaluable treasures, a sense of wonder for life and an optimistic imagination. When Anne first arrived at Bright River Station, she chose to stay outside rather than in the ladies' waiting room because there was more space for imagination out there. When she saw the road lined with white blossoms and cherry trees cascading down the embankment, she immediately pictured a beautiful bride in a wedding gown with a thin, delicate veil. In the eyes of Marilla and Matthew, the surrounding scenery was too familiar, becoming mundane. But in Anne's eyes, it was as beautiful as a fairy mirror. Anne gave them charming names, such as the Lake of Shining Waters, the White Way of Delight, Lover's Lane, Birch Path, Violet Vale, Snow Queen, the Dryad's Bubble, etc. Faced with a plain, unfashionable dress, Anne could still imagine it to her liking. Her bedroom was simple, but through imagination, Anne could hang silk curtains and spread velvet rugs on the floor, transforming the cold room into a poetic sanctuary. For Anne, the imperfect things of everyday life could become perfect through imagination. This kind of self-consoling, deceptive imagination might seem ridiculous to the world, but in her heart, It was the secret to enjoying life. This is similar to what Francie's grandmother said in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Children need imagination, and imagination is priceless. No matter how difficult life becomes later, they won't be stuck in dull routines. However, unfortunately, children nowadays are scheduled with so many activities by adults. If you ask who is the busiest in the world, it's probably children today. In the morning, they have to wake up early for school. In the afternoon, various skill classes and extra tutoring. In the evening, homework until late. Children no longer have time to develop their innate imagination, only to turn into adults living with barren souls, just like their own parents now. Anne's imagination not only helped her live joyfully, optimistically, and with a healthy mindset, but also healed those around her. The first was Matthew, a famously eccentric old man in Avonlea, taciturn, slow, shy, and afraid to talk to anyone of the opposite sex except his sister and aunt. He drove his buggy to the train station to pick up an adopted boy, but when he arrived, he only saw a red-haired girl waiting. How could Matthew even begin to address this misunderstanding? However, Anne didn't let him be awkward. She spoke rapidly. "It's so lovely to meet you, sir. I was worried you wouldn't come. I imagined so many different reasons. Just a moment ago, I was thinking if you didn't come tonight, I'd go around the corner, climb the big cherry tree, and wait until dawn. I wouldn't be afraid at all, hidden among the blooming cherry blossoms, sleeping under the moonlight. Wouldn't that be romantic, like sleeping in a drawing room built of marble? If you didn't come tonight, I'm sure you would come tomorrow." This peculiar girl's imagination truly won Matthew over, making him decide to take her home. With this little bird beside him, chatting, Matthew's once dull world suddenly became much brighter. Then there was Marilla, a dry, serious, and hardworking old woman who was difficult from the start. When she first met Anne, she didn't want to adopt her because she talked too much. But Marilla was quickly drawn in by Anne's imagination. When Anne said that Josie Pye was as ugly as a squashed bun, Marilla tried to suppress her laughter and felt joyful because no one had ever spoken to her with such vivid, imaginative words. Anne's metaphorical expressions melted Marilla's icy heart. In Avonlea, almost everyone captivated by Anne's heart was a child. Those who saw Anne as an outcast were adults. For adults, imagination is something mundane, silly, because it's not practical. They've become too accustomed to thinking carefully and gradually lost the ability to directly perceive the good things around them. When you read The Little Prince, you'll see a hat, or is it a boa constrictor swallowing a huge elephant? Why does the adult world always lack imagination? Why do adults live such dull lives? They were once children with simple wishes and pure hearts, but because of worries and the helplessness that comes from pursuing self-interest, adults have paid a very heavy price. So, how can one live a slightly more interesting life? Only by returning to childhood, thinking about problems with a child's heart. Many difficult problems will become easy to solve. Anne's imagination is the heart of childhood, making the adults in Avonlea begin to discover the obvious beauty they usually overlooked every day, and it also started to heal the people there. An interesting life. Choose gratitude for everything. If imagination is Anne's most outstanding quality, then what imparted that imagination to her was precisely her pure heart, her love for everyone, and her gratitude for life. Before coming to Green Gables, Anne had been adopted twice. We can sense that her life in those two families was far from happy. But when Marilla asked Anne, there was no resentment, only empathy and gratitude. She had eyes that saw beauty, that could grasp joy in life and crush it into medicine for every wounded soul. Out of gratitude for life's blessings, Anne always carefully preserved her kindness, trying her best to forgive all malice. She also unreservedly spread her simple enthusiasm to everyone around her. In Avonlea, Anne loved almost everyone, even those who treated her poorly and hurt her. She could even extend sincere affection to the plants and objects around her. In Anne's mind, plants and trees also had precious lives, so she and all the plants and rivers became friends. She praised them with the greatest love. Mark Twain once said that kindness is a universal language in the world. It can make the blind feel and the deaf hear. Anne used kindness to respond to the lives sprouting from the earth, enriching life, and with energy like spring rain, she made Avonlea, a suffocating place, suddenly come alive. Around the bend, there's sure to be the most beautiful view. Anne spent 5 years at Green Gables, filling her painful childhood with beautiful memories. Diligent, Anne passed her exams for Queen's Academy and received a scholarship. Many adult readers might think that something too wonderful rarely lasts. An overly dreamy, interesting life eventually has to face reality. Indeed, Matthew, suffering from heart disease, passed away upon hearing the news of the bank's collapse. The doctor also warned Marilla not to read or embroider anymore, or she would go blind. This was the first time Anne felt the pain of losing a loved one, and the first time she felt heavy responsibility on her shoulders. But in the end, Anne gave up her scholarship, gave up the opportunity to attend Redmond University, and chose to become a teacher in Avonlea. She stayed at Green Gables to be with Marilla, read to her, and help with household chores. If attending Redmond University was a straight, dream path, then staying in her hometown was a hidden curve in the future. But Anne still chose an optimistic approach towards this curve. I don't know what's around the bend, but I'm sure it will be the most beautiful view. Those who love life also love the curves in it. This interesting yet incredibly resilient girl understood that no one can avoid the twists and turns that life brings, just like rivers in nature are never straight. Because in our progress, we always encounter insurmountable obstacles. For life, these insurmountable obstacles are the failures and difficulties encountered during growth, and they are unavoidable. But it is precisely because of these obstacles, like fierce waves, that life becomes grander, and we gain wonderful experiences and lessons. Anne is an interesting soul, like a rainbow with many different colors. American writer Mark Twain highly praised Anne, saying she was the most adorable and moving child character since the immortal Tom Sawyer. When you read this novel, you will feel the author's wonderful words, but you need to note that behind them is not merely a skillful pen, but a love for life with an interesting soul imbued in the character. What the author wants to convey to us is to use kindness to feel the warmth of the world, use imagination to heal the pessimism in life, and immerse ourselves in and feel this natural universe to enjoy an entire lifetime. These are all the elements for you to start living with an interesting soul. I wish both you and I can become interesting souls, making every living moment a little poetic and profound, illuminating each chapter of our own lives.